You have been told that your greatest strength is your compassion, that empathy, kindness, and moral virtue will protect you, elevate you, and make life meaningful. But Jung saw something darker. He warned that the very qualities that win you love in the daylight may quietly consume you in the night. This wasn't virtue as salvation, this was virtue as poison. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And nowhere is this more terrifying than when your supposed goodness is the very mechanism by which you are destroyed, because what appears to be selflessness often masks self-abandonment. What looks like empathy can turn into emotional slavery, and what society calls moral virtue may secretly be the slow erosion of your soul. Why? Because unchecked virtue does not liberate you, it devours you. Consider Jung's patients who gave endlessly to others, who sacrificed without question, who bore every burden as if it were their holy duty. Outwardly, they appeared saintly. Inwardly, they were collapsing. Their light was being fed upon by what Jung called the shadow hunger of others, those unconscious forces that drain without ever replenishing. They see themselves as virtuous. They sense they are slowly fading. They feel a gnawing emptiness that no amount of giving ever fills. Here lies the paradox. The more virtuous they became, the weaker they grew. The more selfless they were, the more hollow they became. Jung observed that this wasn't an accident. It was a law of psyche. Every unbalanced virtue secretly calls forth its opposite. The empath becomes a prisoner of their own empathy. The giver becomes a hostage of their own generosity. The loyal one becomes shackled by their own faithfulness. This is the trap I call the virtue that devours you. It is not about evil disguised as good. It is about good that has metastasized into evil precisely because it is unconscious. Because every virtue that is unconscious becomes its opposite. Jung said the most terrifying thing a human can do is to accept oneself completely. That includes not only your light, but also the shadow hidden behind your light, the rage in your compassion, the selfishness in your love, the hunger in your sacrifice. To ignore that truth is to let your virtues eat you alive. And so I must ask you, what if the very traits you are most proud of, the ones you clutch as evidence of your goodness, are also the ones that keep you trapped, drained, and devoured? Because what Jung discovered is that the danger is not that you are too weak. The danger is that you are too good, so good that you are blind to the jaws hidden inside your goodness. Jung often said that the psyche does not lie. It whispers its truth through symptoms, compulsions, and collapses. And one of his most haunting case files concerned a man who, by all external accounts, was the embodiment of goodness. He was a teacher, beloved by his students, respected by his colleagues, known in his village as the man who never raised his voice, who always stayed late to help, who never once asked for anything in return. He carried himself like a saint in training. But when Jung received him in Zurich, he found not serenity, but annihilation. The man confessed that every morning he awoke with a leaden body, as though life itself had abandoned him. His mind repeated a single phrase, "I am empty." He was not addicted to alcohol, nor lost in rage, nor consumed by lust. His vice was his virtue. He had given so much of himself that there was nothing left to give. Jung described him in his notes as the hollowed vessel. The paradox terrified him. Here was a man undone not by sin, but by sainthood. His patients who lied, drank, and betrayed often had more vitality than this one who had lived goodness to perfection. The tragedy deepened. At home, his wife admired his patience, but no longer desired him. His children respected his devotion, but felt he was absent even when present. His students wrote him letters of gratitude, but he secretly wished they would forget him. Why? Because all of it, every ounce of praise, was food offered to a man already starving. And Jung saw what few dared to admit. This wasn't compassion. This was consumption, not by demons, but by the unconscious shadows of those around him. He was what Jung might have called a psychological host, the one whose relentless patience provided others with comfort while leaving him psychologically annihilated. It was in cases like this that Jung coined his most dangerous insight. The shadow does not only live in the wicked, it feeds on the virtuous. Because here was the pattern. His colleagues projected laziness onto him, knowing he would cover their mistakes. His wife projected strength onto him, knowing he would carry what she refused to confront. His community projected holiness onto him, knowing he would never rebel. Piece by piece, their shadows feasted on his patience, his availability, his niceness. He had become, in Jung's words, the shock absorber of the collective, carrying all the pain that others refused to bear. This wasn't virtue anymore. This was a system of psychic cannibalism. And Jung asked the chilling question, what becomes of a man who is eaten alive by his own goodness? The answer, he concluded, is despair, not the despair of being evil, but the despair of being nothing. And this is where the lesson begins for you. Because what destroyed this man was not cruelty, not hatred, not aggression. What destroyed him was the refusal to acknowledge the shadow behind his own virtue. If you are to escape the fate of the hollowed ones, you must learn to name the masks of virtue. Jung taught that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so, let us make distinctions that society never taught you, because confusion here is fatal. Niceness is not kindness. Niceness is compliance dressed in virtue. It is the compulsive smile, the quick yes that hides a silent no. Niceness is the ego's strategy to avoid conflict at all costs. It is an outer mask designed to preserve peace while inner resentment festers. Jung warned of this when he wrote of the persona, the social mask that conceals the true self. Niceness is persona at its most destructive, perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. Kindness, by contrast, is rooted in truth. It is not afraid of tension. It can say no with the same clarity that it says yes. It does not serve the other at the cost of the self. It honors the self as part of the other. Where niceness is performance, kindness is presence. Where niceness drains, kindness sustains. Patience, too, has its shadow twin. True patience is sovereign waiting. It is the capacity to endure without collapsing, to give space without losing selfhood. But what most people call patience is actually porousness, an inability to defend psychic boundaries, an unconscious availability that predators detect instantly. Jung wrote that the unconscious is not only individual, but collective. When you are porous, you carry not just your burden, but the unresolved chaos of everyone around you. And so the tragedy emerges. What you thought was virtue was often unconscious collusion. Niceness colludes with manipulation. Porousness colludes with exploitation. And you confuse these with love, devotion, and faith. This is why Jung spoke of the shadow's hunger. He observed that what you refuse to own in yourself, your anger, your refusal, your rightful selfishness, will return through others who will gladly consume the energy you leak. Niceness is shadowed by suppressed aggression. Porousness is shadowed by suppressed sovereignty. Self-sacrifice is shadowed by suppressed selfhood. And the more you deny these truths, the more life arranges itself to drain you, through partners, friends, families, workplaces that sense, even unconsciously, your inability to defend your own psychic flame. So now we must turn inward. How does it feel in the body when your virtue is being consumed? Because your body has always known the difference. It is time you learn to hear it. You already know the truth, not in words, but in your nerves. Jung taught that the psyche speaks through the body long before the mind catches up. And when your so-called virtue is being harvested, the signs are unmistakable. You feel your throat tighten every time you prepare to say no, and the word dies unspoken. You feel your chest cave in when someone asks for more, though you've already given too much. You feel your stomach twist after a conversation where you smiled, nodded, agreed, while every cell inside screamed rebellion. You feel your energy vanish in certain rooms, as if an invisible siphon has been attached to your spine. You feel the exhaustion not just after the event, but during it, as if time itself has been stolen from you. These are not random discomforts. They are what Jung called the somatic eruptions of the unconscious, the body's rebellion against a psyche trapped in roles of endless giving. And yet, how many times have you silenced these signals? How often have you said to yourself, "I'm just tired, I'm being dramatic, I should be more understanding"? That denial is the first stage of possession. You refuse to acknowledge the shadow message hidden in your own sensations, and so the shadow finds another route. It invites others to drain what you refuse to guard. Jung wrote, "The body is the spirit's last attempt to be heard. Every ache of depletion, every bone-deep weariness, every sudden migraine, after being too nice, all of it is your soul knocking from the inside. And if you do not listen, others will gladly take advantage of your deafness. But who are these others? Who are the ones that sense your porousness and feed on it? For that, we need a taxonomy, not of animals, but of psychic predators." Jung warned that the unconscious does not stay hidden, it leaks, and those leaks are not invisible. Certain people can smell them, the way wolves smell blood in snow. When you carry unowned shadow, anger you never use, sovereignty you never claim, you broadcast a silent signal. That signal calls forth what I name the extractors. They come in types. Type 1, the pleading orphan. They cloak themselves in need, presenting helplessness as innocence. They are not malicious, but their dependence becomes parasitic. Because you fear being selfish, therefore you overgive. Because you equate denial with cruelty, therefore you volunteer to be their perpetual parent. Type 2, the charming strategist. They flood you with warmth, compliments, flattery, then pivot to demand understanding. Their weapon is seduction, not brutality. Because you mistake intensity for intimacy, therefore you let them trespass every boundary. Jung observed that projection often wears a smile. This is precisely that mask. Type 3, the fragile titan, powerful on the outside, brittle within. They occupy authority, boss, parent, elder, but shatter when challenged. Any no you offer is framed as betrayal. Because you outsource safety to external authority, therefore you collapse into submission. Jung called this inflation, when the other becomes godlike because you will not claim your own God within. Type 4, the chaos siren. They generate constant emergencies. Everything is urgent, everything a crisis. They thrive on others' adrenaline. Because you confuse urgency with importance, therefore your time is stolen hour by hour. Jung spoke of neurosis as unlived life. The chaos siren ensures that you live theirs instead of yours. And here is the bitter truth. You attract them. Not because you are cursed, but because they are the mirror you refuse to see. Each type corresponds to what you have disowned in yourself. The orphan reflects the part of you that wishes to need, but dares not. The strategist reflects the part of you that longs to charm, seduce, manipulate, but buries it. The titan reflects the part of you that craves power, but refuses to wield it. The siren reflects the part of you that desires intensity, chaos, aliveness, yet represses it. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. You unconsciously recruit others to play out your hidden drama until you decide to own it yourself. So when you say, "Why do I always attract takers, manipulators, the fragile, the chaotic?" the answer is this: because your shadow has been sending the invitation. And until you take it back, you will keep setting the same table, feeding the same guests, and wondering why you always leave hungry. But the question remains, how does this mechanism work? Why is it inevitable that your denied power becomes another's feast? Jung insisted that what is unconscious in you will appear as fate outside of you. Nowhere is this more lethal than in the cycle of extraction, because what you disown, you project, and what you project, others consume. Here is the mechanism in its ruthless clarity. Step 1. Projection. Because you repress your anger, you project it onto others who appear too demanding. Because you repress your desire for power, you see others as controlling. Jung saw this clearly. The qualities you deny in yourself reappear as the very behaviors you cannot escape in others. And so the taker is not just taking, they are carrying what you have abandoned. Step 2. Reward loops. Every time you comply, you receive micro-rewards, praise, peace, temporary relief from conflict. Your nervous system encodes this appeasement as survival. Niceness becomes a conditioned reflex. You believe you're being loved, but you are only being tolerated as long as you leak. Jung called this false adaptation, the way the psyche trades authenticity for belonging. Step 3. Boundary extinction. Here lies the slow death. Each act of overgiving dissolves a little more of your capacity to say no, until eventually there is nothing left to defend. You become what Jung described in his darkest notes, a personality without edges, smooth, saintly, agreeable, and psychically edible. Because here is the brutal truth. The psyche abhors a vacuum. If you do not wield your shadow consciously, others will wield it for you. If you do not defend your fire, others will use it to light their own hearth. If you do not set the boundary, your boundary becomes their banquet. And so the cycle repeats. You repress, you project, they consume, you comply, you erode, until your very identity becomes the currency by which others pay their debts. Jung knew this was not random, but inevitable, because the unconscious will be lived either by you or through you by someone else. But what happens when this cycle is allowed to run unchecked? What is the cost of being eaten alive by your own virtue? Jung identified 3 dangers that strike with surgical precision. Jung warned that unconscious virtue carries its own poisons. To live as the endlessly patient, the eternally nice, the perpetually available, is not harmless. It breeds 3 dangers, each more insidious than the last. Danger 1, self-erosion, the slowest, most invisible death. Your identity dissolves grain by grain. You stop knowing what you want, what you like, what you believe. Jung called this loss of soul, when the self becomes hollowed out through chronic appeasement. Tell, you can't even choose dinner. When asked what you want, you freeze, defer, or say, whatever you like. Danger 2, relational rot. What feels like harmony to you often feels like emptiness to others. Niceness does not breed respect, it breeds contempt. Jung noted that people sense when your yes is false, when your smile is masked, when your patience is porous. And rather than admire you, they exploit you. Tell, people forget your preferences. They stop considering you as an agent and treat you as background. Danger 3, meaning collapse. This is the terminal stage. When every hour is spent serving others' agendas, your life ceases to be your own. Jung described this as negative synchronicity, patterns of futility that repeat until the psyche breaks. Tell, you wake exhausted, not from overwork but from a sense that nothing belongs to you. Fatigue becomes your daily sacrament. These are not minor inconveniences, they are thresholds, and once crossed, they do not heal by accident. Because the psyche, once it has learned to feed others at its own expense, will continue the ritual until you intervene. This is why Jung insisted that the shadow must be faced, not because it is evil, but because without it, your light will be eaten alive. And so the question rises, how do we interrupt the cycle? Not with rage, not with coldness, but with a precise method, what I call the shadow protocol. Jung did not believe in quick fixes. He believed in transformation through conscious integration. The shadow protocol is not a trick, not a slogan, but a phased initiation. 3 stages, each one severing the unconscious contract that kept you trapped in niceness, porousness, and depletion. Phase 1, containment, 7 days, nervous system groundwork. The first step is not outward defiance, but inward containment. Jung warned that those who confront the shadow without grounding are devoured by it. So you begin by training your body to endure the tension of saying no. Somatic anchor. 3 times a day, practice 90-second exhalations. When the breath slows, the panic of disappointing others loses its grip. Language audit. Replace apologies with acknowledgments. Do not say, "I'm sorry, I can't." Say, "I'm not available." No shame, no excuse. Boundary inventory. Write down the 5 people or activities that most drain your energy. Quantify the hours lost each week. Confront the math of your self-erasure. This is containment. Your psyche begins to feel its edges again. Phase 2, calibration, 14 days, micro-boundaries in live fire. Containment is inward. Calibration is outward. Jung taught that individuation happens by confronting life, not retreating from it. Here you begin to test boundaries in the field. Tiny refusals. Say no to 3 trivial requests each week. Decline a favor. Skip a call. Let an email wait. Track your bodily sensations. They will teach you more than words. Delay scripts. Instead of reflexive yes, say, "I'll check my capacity and reply later." This delays the old survival reflex and rewires your nervous system. Access control. Create a daily office hours block. All favors and requests live inside it. Outside it, you are unavailable. This trains others to encounter your edges. Calibration is surgical, small cuts, precisely measured, until you reclaim the right to choose. Phase 3. Integration, ongoing. Identity shift from nice, kind. Containment and calibration prepare the soil. Integration plants the new self. Jung wrote that individuation is becoming who you are, not who others demand you to be. Integration is where niceness dies and authentic kindness is born. Shadow reps. Spend 5 minutes daily writing uncensored desires, angers, refusals. No censor, no correction. This is shadow hygiene. Relational renegotiation. With chronic extractors, reset the contract in 2 sentences. I will no longer do X. If that's a problem, I understand. Then, hold the silence. Meaning, rebuild. Dedicate 10% of your weekly hours to projects with no audience, no approval. This starves the compulsion to please and feeds the authentic self. Here, the transformation becomes visible. Others sense that something fundamental has shifted. You are no longer edible. You are no longer host. You are sovereign. And yet, words are weapons here. You will need specific phrases, short, unyielding, repeatable. This is where scripts matter. Jung taught that transformation is not complete until it finds expression in language. The unconscious must be given a voice. Without words, your shadow remains theory. With words, it becomes armor. And so you must carry scripts, short, sharp, undeniable. They are not explanations, they are edges. For the time vampire. When they linger, consume, stretch the clock. I'm not available for open-ended chats. If you need a decision, send me options by email. This severs the endless siphon of time and forces structure. For the guilt hook. When they say, "After all I've done for you, I care about you, and I'm still not able to do that." Notice the paradox. Affirmation without surrender. This disarms manipulation while preserving clarity. For the love bomb loop. When intensity replaces intimacy, fast closeness doesn't work for me. Let's slow the pace. The hidden rule. You control tempo, not them. For the authority pressure. When bosses, elders, or leaders demand compliance, I respect the role. My answer is no. Respect without submission. Honor without collapse. For the chaos siren. When the emergency is never-ending, if it's urgent, use this form. If not, we'll address it Friday. Urgency is contained. Drama loses its bite. These phrases are more than words. They are thresholds. Each one signals to the unconscious of the other, this psyche has edges, and you will not cross them uninvited. And here lies the hidden lesson. The extractor does not fear cruelty. They fear clarity. Because clarity cannot be negotiated, seduced, or bullied. It is the language of sovereignty. But beware, clarity will be tested. The moment you begin to speak differently, the old patterns will rise up to reassert themselves, which is why you must know the pitfalls, those subtle traps that undo the progress of many. Every transformation attracts resistance, not just from others, but from within. Jung taught that the psyche resists its own evolution, what he called enantiodromia, the swing back into the old opposite. And so when you begin to defend your edges, beware of the traps that wait to pull you back into the cycle of depletion. Pitfall 1. Over-explaining. You feel the urge to justify your no, to stack reasons like sandbags against the flood of guilt. But explanation dilutes power. The more words you pour out, the less weight they carry. Fix. One sentence, then silence. Let discomfort do its work. Jung said the shadow speaks in tension. Let that tension stand. Pitfall 2. Boundary without backup. You say no, then cave under pressure. The old reflex reasserts itself, and the extractor learns you can be bent. Fix. Pre-commit a consequence. If they press, you leave the room. If they persist, you end the call. Boundaries must have teeth, or they are invitations. Pitfall 3. All or nothing rebellion. After years of niceness, you erupt into coldness or cruelty. This is the pendulum swing, not sovereignty, but shadow possession. Fix. Warm face, firm spine. Keep kindness in your tone, but iron in your words. Integration is edge plus heart, not edge without it. Pitfall 4. Righteous contempt. You discover the extractor's tactics and burn with superiority. You demonize them, imagining yourself above the game. But contempt ties you to the same pattern. It is still reaction, not sovereignty. Fix. See the pattern, not the person. Protect, don't punish. Withdraw without hatred. Jung warned that what you hate most in others is usually what you have not yet owned in yourself. Avoiding these pitfalls keeps your transformation stable. But stability is not enough. You must ritualize new practices, habits that keep your edges sharp and your compassion unexploited. Jung knew that individuation is never finished. The moment you think the work is over, the unconscious slips back in through habit, fatigue, or sentimentality. That is why you must adopt non-negotiables, daily and weekly rituals that anchor your sovereignty. Without them, you drift back into the old role of host, feeder, shock absorber. 1. The Morning Minute. Each dawn, speak a single sentence beginning with I choose, not I must, not I should. Choice reclaims authorship. Jung insisted that the ego must align with the self each day, or else unconscious forces take the wheel. 2. Capacity calendar. Your time is your psychic blood. Color code your true bandwidth. Only say yes inside the green. Red and yellow blocks are sacred refusals. This turns boundaries into a visible, embodied map. 3. Weekly Defawn review. At week's end, ask, where did I appease? Where did I abandon myself? Then plan a micro-repair for the coming days. Jung said, what is not made conscious returns as fate. This review ensures appeasement never becomes fate again. 4. No contact windows. 2 hours a day in which you cannot be reached, by phone, by message, by demand. The world does not collapse. Instead, the psyche heals. This is psychological economy, the conscious management of your energy. 5. The shadow date. Once a week, spend 30 minutes with your unfiltered desires. Write them, paint them, walk them. No justification, no editing. Jung called the shadow the unlived life. A shadow date ensures your unlived life is lived safely and consciously. These practices are not luxuries. They are the immune system of your soul. Without them, niceness will creep back in, porousness will reopen, and the extractors will find you again. With them, you become unassailable, kind yet edged, giving yet sovereign. But history offers us examples. some who failed to maintain these practices and paid with their lives, and others who embodied them and transformed entire cultures. Jung loved to illustrate psychology through myth and history, for he believed the collective unconscious speaks in stories. And so, let us hold up two mirrors, one showing what happens when niceness consumes a life, the other when shadow is integrated into sovereignty. The cautionary figure, the pleasing courtier. History is full of men and women who perfected compliance to survive in the courts of kings. One advisor, recorded in the chronicles of Renaissance Italy, rose high by never disagreeing, never challenging, always flattering. He was indispensable, yet invisible. When the king tired of him, he was cast aside without ceremony, dying in obscurity. His fate echoes Jung's warning. The most terrifying fate is to live a life not your own. The courtier's niceness secured safety for a time, but it cost him his soul. The exemplary figure, Eleanor Roosevelt. A woman who began as the background to power, dutiful, soft-spoken, endlessly accommodating. But when betrayal and grief broke her compliance, she integrated her shadow. She became outspoken, set boundaries even against presidents, and transformed compassion into action. Her kindness had teeth. She embodies what Jung called individuation, the union of light and shadow into wholeness. The lesson is stark. Niceness without shadow leads to erasure. Kindness with shadow leads to transformation. Because Jung understood that the true danger is not cruelty, but unconscious goodness. The unconscious courtier dies forgotten. The integrated sovereign shifts history. And so, you too must choose which figure to embody. Will you remain the compliant host to others' shadows, or will you carry your own shadow into light, becoming both kind and unbreakable? But choice is not enough. You must embody it. And so I give you the exercise that seals this transformation, 10 days of deliberate practice to weld shadow and kindness together. Jung taught that knowledge without practice is fantasy. To integrate shadow and light, you must act. And so I give you a 10-day crucible, a simple but unforgiving sequence designed to weld firmness and compassion, spine and heart. Each day, you will confront both your reflex to please and your terror of disappointing. Days 1-3, containment. For 3 days, begin with breath. Each morning, 3 cycles of deep exhalation, 90 seconds each. This conditions the body to stay present when the panic of saying no arises. At night, replace every apology in your journal with acknowledgement, not, "I'm sorry I was tired," but "I chose rest." Already your language shifts from guilt to ownership. Days 4-7, calibration. Here you train in the field. Commit to 3 tiny refusals across these days, requests so small they seem harmless. Decline an invitation. Let a message wait. Say, "I'll check my capacity and answer later." Record the sensations in your body. You will notice heat, trembling, even nausea. That is not weakness. It is the shadow surfacing, finally invited to speak. Days 8-10. Integration. Now you face the deeper contract. Choose one chronic extractor in your life, the colleague, the relative, the friend who feeds endlessly. Speak a 2-line renegotiation. "I will no longer do X. If that's a problem, I understand." Then hold the silence. Watch the panic rise and fall. Watch their old tactics flicker and fail. Throughout the challenge, keep a single reflection question. Where did kindness increase because I kept an edge? For you will discover something paradoxical. When you defend yourself, your kindness becomes sharper, more precise, more alive. Jung observed this truth in his patients. When the shadow is integrated, love does not diminish. It becomes conscious. This exercise is not symbolic. It is initiation. 10 days to prove to yourself that you can be both heart and spine, tenderness and iron. And once you cross it, you will never return to unconscious niceness again. We began with a paradox, the virtue that devours you. We end with its reversal, the virtue that liberates you. The danger was never that you cared too much. The danger was that you cared unconsciously. The real threat was not your empathy, but your refusal to own the shadow hidden within it. Because unclaimed shadow leaks. And what leaks, others feed upon. But when you integrate the shadow, when you allow anger, selfishness, and refusal to exist alongside love, patience, and care, something extraordinary happens. Your light stops leaking. It condenses into power, and power in Jung's sense is not domination, but presence. A sovereignty that radiates without needing to perform, persuade, or plead. Others will feel it. Manipulators who once circled you will withdraw, sensing that the banquet has closed. Friends who once overlooked you will look again, startled by the clarity in your voice. And you yourself will wake not with dread, but with choice. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is what it means, not to be nice, but to be whole, not to leak, but to lead, not to serve as host for others' shadows, but to stand as a sovereign among equals. So I leave you with this commission. Identify your extractor. Choose your script. Begin phase 1 tonight. Then return here in 10 days and speak what changed. Declare the line you drew, the shadow you owned, the light you reclaimed. Because the world does not need more niceness. It needs kindness with teeth. It needs souls who can feel everything without being consumed, who can love without being devoured, who can lead without apology. The danger is not that you are too good. The danger is that you do not yet know how powerful your goodness becomes once fused with shadow. Use it as cultural medicine. Use it as constructive leverage, and become part of what is next.